Welcome to this event. And our topic today is inclusive decision making. And this is co-organized by Stevens Leadership Portal, whose goal is to provide resources and community for all leadership learners and practitioners, especially on topics at the intersection of leadership, technology, and inclusivity. My name is Wei Zheng. I'm a Richard R. Rosset Chair in Leadership. I'm a co-founder of Stevens Leadership Portal and also co-director of Stevens Inclusive Leadership Certificate Program. So we're doing a lot of things, hopefully to help us all to enhance inclusiveness of everyone in our environment. And for those of you who are in the Inclusive Leadership Certificate Program, please do remember to write a reflection on your learning from today and submit it to our Canvas site. So without further ado, let's get started. So let me introduce our panelists very quickly, and then we'll dive into, I'll give them a chance to talk about their background, and then we'll dive into questions of what specific methods and processes you use in your workplace to encourage inclusive decision-making. So the first panelist is Chitra Dorai. She's the founder and CEO of Amicus Brain Innovations. She's also a former IBM Fellow, VP, and CTO. Welcome, Chitra.
Thank you, Wei Zheng. I'm delighted to be here. Thanks for this opportunity to be part of this panelist. I'm so looking forward to listening to what others have to say and learn from their experiences. So Wei Zheng gave a short introduction. So I'm an AI scientist by training. For 30 plus years now, I have done a lot of AI and machine learning in many different industries, even before AI became the buzzword of the day, and ChatGPT is known to every every human being, so to speak. So so now I head the company. It's a digital health company called Amicus Brain. In a way, it is inclusive already in terms of the technology we built. We are transforming with our technology solutions the care management for people living with dementia across the globe. So as aging happens, some of us have do go through different kinds of neurodegenerative disorders, and we are building technologies to make them feel included, continue to maintain their independent and live a fulfilled life, regardless of the cognitive decline that accompanies aging. So I feel that our company has earned the right to be here in a way by the very nature of the work we do. Coming back to the center of this, the theme of this panel, Wei Zheng also introduced me as having come from IBM. So I'm an alumnus of IBM, so to speak. I spent 20 plus years there in various leadership positions at IBM Research to IBM Consulting and very many different units. And through that, it was apparent when I started this organization that I wanted to create my own blueprint of how a young company like us can be well run, where the culture is not an add-on, but it is right from day one. So part of that is creating. When I started the company, not only we had drafted our purpose and mission and values of how we will look at the world and how we will deliver our solutions. We also felt that culture is not static. It has to be executed, practiced, lived in everything we do. And therefore, it cannot be handed down from me to my team members. And that naturally leads us to this whole habit, I would say. Actually, it's a practice that we do daily in terms of including all our team members in decision making. So for me, it's a very logical sequence of having a strong governance and great culture at the company very naturally leads to inclusive decision making.
Excellent, excellent. Let's dive into that later in a minute. Thank you so much, Chitra. And the second panelist today is Priya Iragavarapu. Sorry, I'm not sure I'm pronouncing your last name right. Iragavarapu.
Yes, that is perfect. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thanks, Wei. Thank you all for the invitation. I'm Priya Iragavarapu. I'm the Vice President of data science and analytics, leading the data science practice at AArete. AArete is a boutique consulting company. We are headquartered in Chicago, and we have offices across the globe in EU and in India as well, and in US. And one of my passions through my work at AArete, and prior to that, I have also had deep expertise and experience working in the financial sector with American Express and US Bank. So one of my key passions, obviously, being part of AArete, working within the healthcare payer industry, and also working on the financial services industry. Equitable AI in healthcare and financial services are the key passions that I have, and I'm very excited to share my thoughts and also learn from this panel, and also to hear your thoughts from the audience as well, to see where you are, how you are applying some of this at various places where you are working at or studying, and looking forward to making this more interactive. And thank you, Wei, for the opportunity.
Thank you, Priya. And our third panelist, Alysha Campbell. Alysha, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you so much, and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Alysha M. Campbell. I'm the founder and CEO of CultureShift HR, which is a fractional human resources and diversity, equity, and inclusion consultancy firm. So we partner with nonprofits as well as for-profit organizations, helping them to create inclusive workplace strategies and also help to revamp and make inclusive HR frameworks and decisions. I started in this industry over 10 years ago, and the passion of which I have for people experiences was really stemmed from my own experience in the workplace. And so that kind of made me feel like, well, if there isn't an opportunity to create equitability where I am, then I want to help others do the same. And that's what led me to building my organization. Started as a solopreneur, now as a small team of 6 that allows us to create powerful conversations that are inclusive and employee focused.
Wonderful. Welcome, Alysha. Our fourth panelist is Frank Frascella. Frank, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Wei. Hello, everybody. If you can hear me okay, my name is Frank Frascella. I'm humbled to be here, so thank you very much for the opportunity to be among these distinguished panelists. I work for a very small company called Microsoft. Maybe some of you have heard of us. And the reason why I thought this topic was so unique was, I get to talk about how we embody inclusiveness within our organization, right? So we're going to get to how I came to be and how I took this role at Microsoft. But a lot of the discussion track that we're going to talk about today, I will help you to relate as how we implement it in an organization such as Microsoft, being so big and so large as we are. And everyone doesn't know, right? Our mission statement is to empower every employee, or I should say every person in every organization in the world to achieve more. That's a pretty big mission statement, right? So how do we do that? And how do we leverage diversity and inclusion within our organization to do so is something we'll talk about a little bit later. But again, thank you for the time. Again, humbled to be part of this distinguished panel. So appreciate it.
Well, thank you. Welcome, Frank.
Thank you
So much. Thank you all very much for giving us the context of your expertise and insights. So let's dive in terms of, first of all, what does inclusive decision-making look like to you? So how do you know your decision-making has been inclusive? Do you have measures? Do you have any processes? Do you have any signals you look for to know that? Maybe we can start with you, Priya?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So from my perspective, the diversity DEI decision-making process essentially should be based, it should be value-based, and there needs to be diverse team composition, like building the teams with the members from various backgrounds, disciplines, and thought process, so that we have the breadth of perspectives at the table. And then we should have inclusive meetings and tools like maybe round robin speaking, anonymous suggestion boxes and ideas, and to contribute, to speak up in a potentially unintimidating way in a setting that is helpful. And then we obviously have to have a bias training associated with it, provide training on unconscious bias, so that we can make team members be aware of their own biases and how that can impact decision making. Further, I also would say that equity audits need to be conducted within your organizations to assess the inclusiveness, the current practices, and identify areas of improvement, and to have a decision-making framework that where we implement frameworks that require specific consideration of inclusivity impacts, like real framework, or there's also this framework called the Global Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Benchmarks that you can incorporate. It's actually an assessment framework that you can leverage. But at the end of the day, make sure there is a feedback loop. Establishing the feedback mechanisms where the stakeholders can comment on the decisions and the processes, and then we can essentially those can be used to make further improvements to the process and embedded along with into the culture of the organization. I think it is the training or the bias recognition or assessment. They all shouldn't just be like a one-time thing that sits outside of your daily practice. It has to be embedded into the culture, and that's really the true way of being able to enable a DEI-based inclusive decision-making process.
Oh, excellent. So it looks like your organization is very, very intentional in leveraging these tools to help you build inclusion. Maybe may I ask Frank? So Frank, you are in a relatively larger organization, and how do you do that?
Yeah. So I echo everything Priya said, right? So I run the national business here for our Azure cloud business in the financial services market. So, as Priya mentioned, the way we take that into practice is a few different ways. So one of the ways is diversity and inclusion is actually part of what we call our core priority, right? So at Microsoft, we have done away with traditional performance reviews, and we talk about what we call connects, which is an opportunity for a manager or a leader and their report to come together, talk about their past history, what's worked, what's not worked, and what their growth potential looks like for the future, and then ways in which we can be part of that growth, right? So it's not I'm going to ding you on a performance review. It's really, here are the core priorities that we seek out, and Microsoft, on the manager side, it's model, coach, and care. On the employee side, it's centered around how do I contribute to the success of others? How do I leverage the success of others to contribute to my own success? And then the third is really around diversity and inclusion, and how do I be inclusive in my decision making? And so ways that we measure that are things like, we encourage, I don't know if everyone on this phone is or on this panel has read Brené Brown's books, but she uses this great term that we use in Microsoft called rumbles, right? Where when we have a difficult conversation, we have a challenging situation, we have a rumble. We have a meeting in which we bring multiple members of the team together. We have large extended, what we call virtual teams. So it might be sales, it might be support, it might be technical, it might be engineering. And we'll come together in the room and we have an open discussion about what's going on with the particular customer or the challenge, whether it's internal or external, and how do we work together to solve that problem. All opportunities to speak are available in that rumble. There are no bad suggestions. And we they can be emotional, but they're very powerful. So we have that quite a bit at Microsoft to measure, or I should say, to encourage people to sort of challenge the status quo. Another point that we typically do is that we ensure, as Priya said, we ensure everyone in the room has an opportunity to speak up. And then the way that we measure that is that we'll have consistent team meetings, whether they're biweekly or monthly. And each team meeting, a member of my team will take lead. Right. So it's not that everyone needs to speak up in every meeting, because that's sometimes unattainable. But it's how do I show purpose, and how do I show the intentions and the intentional diversity that we instill in our teams at Microsoft, and how they show up in our practice every day. And then one last thing that I just want to close on is that I do specifically within my team is at every team meeting, we take the first 5 to 10 minutes and we actually formalize praise for other folks, internal or external to the team, to demonstrate that we recognize the hard work that they've done in any particular setting, whether it be a challenging customer, excuse me, or it might be a challenging situation, or maybe it was just, hey, this person showed up and did a great job. So we formalize that, because what that ends up being is that's part of what their connects are that we have twice a year, in which the individual that received that praise can demonstrate to their leader that they're being inclusive, right? So not only does my team get to demonstrate inclusivity, but we actually extend that to other team members and encourage that's I should say teamwork building across the organization. So that's how we embody it. And Priya, you said everything that we study here, and we practice everything that you've actually you mentioned. So yeah, hope that was helpful.
Yes, thank you. I love the idea of the rumbles and also the praise. So is the praise just a follow-up? The praise is every meeting you have 5 to 10 minutes doing this, or maybe quarterly or yearly you do this?
No. So I conduct bi-weekly meetings with my team, where we go over business and we go over, we might have a topic du jour, and then we'll go over current business, what have you. But in every team meeting, we take the first 5 minutes and we actually formally praise, like I said, somebody internally or externally to the team. We have a tool within Microsoft that we can put that in, and it's like shoots over a little IM, a little email, says, hey, you've been recognized, you've done a great job. And it's a little, less, it's a tweet, right? It's less than 150 words of 150 characters of, hey, this is why you're being recognized. And the person that gets that, they can do what they want with it, but it also goes to their manager. So it fosters this, this sense of accomplishment, right? In the little things, not because everybody gets praise on the big things, but it's the daily things that nobody really takes a look at. So what we try to do is encourage that on a consistent basis.
Excellent. If I may just follow up on one last thing about the rumble.
Yeah.
So who are supposed to hold the rumbles? Because some managers may not feel comfortable. Like, how do I get into those difficult conversations? How do I close? How do I follow up? So how do you do that?
Oh, that's a great question. I will tell you that it is a practice. It's a consistent practice, right? Because some people are quite uncomfortable in feeling that they have an open dialogue with a leader potentially in the room. So what I typically do for a rumble, if I'm going to institute a rumble for a certain situation, I'll reach out to the leader of the individuals that I want to participate, just to let them know, hey, we're going to conduct this rumble. Here's the purpose. Here's what we should try to get out of it, but let it be organic. And then we invite everybody to the room. We disclose that everything in this room is off the record, right? This is the ability for us to grow as individuals and as a group, so that we can solve the problem at hand, which might be X, Y, or Z, whatever it is. And then it's usually a half an hour dialogue, and we go through. We have everyone speak up and talk about their opinion, what they see, and a potential solution to the challenge at hand, right? So it's not that we just want everybody to complain to each other, or everybody, point fingers. It's, here's my viewpoint, and here's what I think we could do to solve this problem. And the way we close is we actually capture all that feedback. I'll put together a quick email thanking everybody for participating. Here are the action items we agreed upon in the email, and away it goes. And what I've found over the course of the last few years that I've been doing this at Microsoft is that it really fosters a sense of teamwork. Like, people actually feel like they're in it together, even though they might have had a conflict going into that room, right? So I might not need to be your best friend. That's not what I'm asking for, but it's, let's figure out a way to work together so you can solve the customer's problem, the engineering problem, whatever the problem is at hand. And those people usually come out much better than they went in. So I encourage it if folks haven't done it. It's super powerful, very uncomfortable. If you do it right, it should be very uncomfortable, but it's very powerful.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for giving more details to that.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Maybe can we go to Chitra? So you have experience both in larger organizations and smaller organizations. What's your take? What are some processes or ideas you look for to engage people, get input, and maybe encourage innovation too?
Right. In our organization, we call it huddle, not rumble.
Huddle? Oh, huddle?
There are some principles which are so well established and proven best practices, whether it's Microsoft or a tiny startup like Amicus Brain, that we are all practicing. So having had the corporate experience, actually, I would say that helped quite a bit. It's one thing with a 20-year-old startup, people in their 20s starting up, where they have to invent some of these things on the fly, right? When they encounter situations, to having gone through a corporate career, I knew what exactly were fantastic, practices to continue to carry on into my organization as I built this, and where also I needed to put my own stamp in it. And the very one distinctive item would be this, not Rumble, but Daily Huddle. But we do, we are a virtual company. We came on board totally during COVID. So therefore you can imagine everything was done, we are doing it virtually. And therefore there's an extra level of pressure to continue that partnership and teaming, even though people are in so many different time zones, from Singapore to India to Nairobi to New York, where I am at. So we have a practice of this daily huddle, and we are very intentional. Again, you're seeing that expression coming, right? It's about ensuring full participation, not majority. That's something that I carried away, that often majority is mixed up with having everyone's buy-in, not necessarily. So being a startup, smaller company, I could ensure that we could all do our best every day to ensure full participation. So it starts from there, that you need to, in order to have the complete buy-in from your team, we have to go all out, strive for that full participation, hear everyone's voice, And I understand the scale will bring when we grow bigger, the scale will bring its own challenges to ensuring, but I think having practiced this, my team members will be champions of that, ensuring full participation. And doing everything. I also, during the huddles, we talk about tough things, where we can continue to improve as a company, as well as solving technical problems. So we do mindfully allocate time to address tough, difficult questions, things that bothered anyone, to be able to discuss in the open. And that is so full participation. And this is a lesson I took away. I have been a minority computer scientist for such a long time, token women scientist back in the 90s, AI scientist that too, when AI was not such a good word. So I have instituted a practice to make sure I call out everyone by name and ensure that they have something to say. So my team has come to expect that they are not, their voices will be heard, and they are empowered to speak on their own. And if they're not, I'm going to call out anyway, call on them to speak up. So I think that has given them, I have seen the maturity and growth into confidence that has come about in some of our, younger technical professionals due to that explicit practice. And I hope we will continue to do that. And then there is this notion that we continue to reinforce on everybody, that the decision we take is a shared responsibility. It's not about what someone walks away as their win, but this is really, how can we pull together every bit of data that we have, input that we hear, and come up with a solution that we can all get behind, rather than someone leaving the room not having bought in, or not having fully sold on the idea. So we want to leave the meeting with everyone. Again, go around the we literally call it, our room. Had we been in person, that's where we would be assembling. So our huddle room, so to speak, virtually, we will ensure that we understand our collective responsibility, and therefore, along with that comes the expectation that we would be demonstrating that behavior that we have agreed upon in every hour, every minute, internally and externally.
Well, excellent. I love the idea of full participation, not just majority participation. So let me ask you this. So in my research, I encountered some skepticism. So some skeptics would be, I try to involve everyone, but some people just don't have the expertise or things, and I need to follow up if I make sure everybody participates. Maybe in larger organizations, it'll take me a lot more time. So how do you respond to that? This efficiency and inclusiveness sort of dichotomy, at least on the surface. What's your take on that?
Sure. Yes. I've seen that, right, in action, because some of the teams could be I was the global CTO for cognitive computing in my last role, and I was leading a team of technical leader for more than 30,000 people at least. So the numbers kept on changing, the employee population. So it is. But if you start looking into it closely, at the end of the day, the teams are small. You have first line managers and then you have second line managers. So only when you look at it very in an abstract manner, it feels like a difficult problem. But when you start decomposing it, ultimately it is whatever the size of the organization, whether it's in Microsoft or IBM or it is a team composed of certain number of people. So if we cannot have full participation in the meeting, I think it's a leader's responsibility to seek it out and make sure that the voices are, we have so many communication channels these days. That's not the problem. So I think it's usually okay, I've heard it all. Chitra is not there. I'm sure Chitra will accept this. Let's move on. But that's a very different attitude to let's reach out to Chitra and then give her a recap of what happened and hear her thoughts. It's a very different. And I think it's the attitude leaders bring to the table and the effort they put in. And those practices feed themselves into best practices, and our employees become the advocates when they are dealing, even when the leader is not, the manager is not present.
Love that. Thank you. So it's the attitude. It's the attitude determines our strategy and actions, and also the decomposing the problem. I love that. It's not an abstract thing. We talk about efficiency versus inclusiveness. Seems like opposite, but they're not. Thank you so much, Chitra. Alysha, now let's come to you. So you have been doing a lot of work with a whole variety of organizations. What's your take on what inclusive decision-making looks like to you, and any insights you'd like to share on this?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm of the mindset, and I'm always telling my partners this, that you want to have the mindset of nothing for us without us. So if we're creating a new protocol, a new framework, if we're trying to help create more inclusivity within our minority communities that are within our organization, let's make sure that their voices are at the table. Let's make sure that they're included from the very beginning of the initiative all the way into implementation, and then post-implementation as well. Let's gather feedback. Let's make sure that we're not making assumptions, we're not leaning in with our biases, and we're being really focused on what they are looking for and the medium or vehicle of which it is that we're utilizing to reach that end goal. And so that's always a big thing, because very often we'll come together with a good, oh, we have a great idea, but did you talk to that group yet? Are they aware? Do they have the same sentiment? Are we, being mindful of different other cultural elements that because we don't belong to that identity, we're not being mindful of? And so that always begins to get them to kind of stop and pause and kind of reevaluate or reconsider the initiative and who's involved and what that begins to look like. So I'm big. That's like a kind of the golden rule there. And I would say also being mindful of that at every single stage of the decision-making process. So it's one thing to have it at the beginning, but make sure that it continues as best as possible from beginning to end.
Great. Thank you. So I have a question regarding the awareness piece, because people try to say, we have to ask all the people that we think should be involved in the decision, but it seems like an awareness, maybe there are some blind spots. I never thought about asking this other group because it has not been the existing practice. Are there things you can help them to become more aware of, I'm missing on this piece, or I'm missing who's not at the table? Are there things to encourage people to think about what has been missing?
Yeah, that's a great question. So always when you're making a decision, think about those who are being invited to contribute to that decision, and then ask yourself, are they affiliated with this community? Do they have any relation to that community or any ties to that community? And if the answer is no, then I would stop that meeting and open up the table to say, okay, how do we get more of those voices in this decision-making process? And if people decide, you know what, I trust you, and I don't wish to participate, that's fine as well. But at least you put it out there. You put out that call to action, and now people can now join into that space and participate.
Great. Thank you so much. My next question. So you already addressed some of the processes and tools you use, which are excellent. Can we reflect a little bit on things that haven't worked or didn't work in the past, some lessons learned, or some processes or practices you see other organizations use that are not working so well, because we need to be sort of aware of these ineffective inclusive tools. So do any of you have any examples to share? Any one of you, whoever's ready.
I mean, in terms of what doesn't work, I would say, I wouldn't say it's necessarily a tool or a tactic, because I think anything that begins to drive more diversity, equity, and inclusion is important. And we have to start somewhere. And one thing I think that I always talk about with clients is that we have to be intentional, because many times we think, oh, isn't this just tokenism? Aren't we just, checking a box? And we have to be mindful that the way that we work inherently isn't inclusive. The systems we have, the frameworks, the institutions we live, breathe, and live and breathe in are not made to be inclusive. So we have to be really intentional, ask the right questions, create the space so that we can then put in equitable practices and really reshape the systems and processes of which that we work in. So I would say, in terms of things not working, assuming that, just doing something when you do it is okay. I always know that there should be some type of practice or protocol prior to anything being implemented. I would say two mistakes that I've seen is not looking at data. So many times when we think about, okay, how are we going to create more inclusivity? We start with some key things, maybe some trainings, ERGs, or we have a policy, and all those things are key. But we have also data on the demographic of our organization. What does the promotion cycle look like over the last 5 years? Who's getting promoted, or what's the succession plan for some of our executives? And what does the makeup of those trends look like? That is an awesome opportunity to look and say, okay, we're not promoting our women in the workplace, we're not promoting our minority communities. Now, how can we begin to change the narrative? And then build out programs and different elements that help solve the actual problem. So don't just do things just to do them. And I would say 3, in terms of tools and resources, nothing's going to be a one-size-fits-all solution. So learn a tool that will work for you, but then grow and adapt to other tools as you mature and grow in your maturity model as well.
Great, thank you. Thank you so much. So can I follow up on this? Taking action on data. I think a lot of organizations track their representation data from different demographic groups. And then how do you act on the data especially, or how do you suggest managers act on the data? What do you do with them to help them act, taking specific actions based on the data? For example, maybe my team members are not being promoted equally or equitably, and how do I approach that?
Yeah, asking a lot of questions. I mean, and I say that in the sense that there could be so much that happens in an employee life cycle during a year when someone joins, to years that go by, and systems change, documents get updated. And so the data will never be 100%. And also the data in and of itself may also have some inequities in it as well. So that's a side conversation. But I would say, if you're a manager looking at data, you want to work with your HR partner or your D&I team to understand maybe just some of the rationale for some of the actions. So for example, if we're seeing that we're having a higher promotion for men versus women in the organization, what might be the driver of this? Are men getting more exposure to other projects? Are they getting put on lead on things versus women? Is there training opportunities? Is there skills gaps? How are we evaluating those promotions? And who's deciding and being the final decider on what that promotion looks like? Asking those types of questions will start to unveil the gaps within the processes. And then that's where we begin to build in the solutions for how we begin to fix those things. But when you get the data, you kind of go on a little bit of a fact-finding mission. And as much data as you can get, then begin to build the solutions from there. And then I would also say too, as well, like, talk to your teams, especially those who have been there for a while, like 3 to 5 years. They've probably seen a lot already, and they might be able to give you some incredible insight on some of the dynamics, some of the rationale between certain team movements or certain, team changes that the numbers won't tell you. So I think it's a good balance of like the quantitative data as well as the qualitative data as well.
I love that. Yeah. So it's acting or turning data into insights, and then they can be acted on. We can have all the data in the world, but they're not directing our action. I love the questions you asked to get closer to insights and action. Thank you.
Yeah.
Anyone else would like to jump in and talk about maybe something that didn't work, or you want to relate to what Alysha talked about? That's totally fine too.
Maybe I can.
Go ahead,
go for it.
No, go ahead.
That's very good. We have lots of thoughts to offer. Go for it, Frank.
Now, so I mean, Alysha, you made a couple of points that were really, really valid that I see at Microsoft, and a couple of things. The controversial term is affirmative action, right? And we talk about, that was the precursor to I think the way we look at inclusivity now. And one of the things that we leveraged that I've seen in practice since I've been here for the last 5 years is we still have to do better, right? From a leadership and executive level perspective, our minority representation is subpar. We know that. We published it. We talk about it all the time. And so an area in which that we've actually reflected, there's a couple things that you just talked about, right? Using data as insights, using data to drive insights. We actually went back and taught our managers in hiring around biases, right? Proximity bias, recency bias. You guys probably know a lot of these terms better than I do. And to identify those biases when looking at a talent pool in the organization so that we're not looking at somebody that's reflective of us and when we're making hiring decisions. From an HR perspective and a recruitment perspective, we don't mandate a certain race or associate ethnicity or gender needs to be hired, but we do mandate that we have to have a diverse pool of candidates, right? Because we recognize that in the technology world, there is an underrepresentation of minorities as well as women, fortunately, in this business. So we actually mandate that our recruiting practices recruit, or 80% of the applicants within a talent pool need to be representative of those diverse communities. So it's not taking it down to like we have to have 5 people in this group be a minority or a different gender, but it's let's make sure that the pool of individuals that we look at identify the folks that we're misrepresenting in the business. The talent and the aptitude still needs to come through, but it's being able to identify, I think, in the initial part of that talent recruitment is something that we've done to change some of the ways that we recognize we have to work on. So it was funny as you were speaking, Alysha. I was like, wow, I actually seen that change and saw that data turn into insights. So I appreciate you mentioning that.
Thank you, Frank. Chitra, go ahead.
I would offer up a different challenge or a hindrance to the success of inclusive decision making. That would be lack of transparency. When a process, you can bring people to the table, you can do everything possible in your power to get all the voices heard. But if there is no common baseline of what they ought to know about the problem, if the process is shrouded in mystery, with the tribal knowledge, leader secrets, and so on, then that convening is really not very effective. So I think transparency, especially in large organizations, how certain decisions get made, promotions was brought up. There ought to be more transparency about that. So people have the same level of data in order to reflect and go beyond what the data suggests in order to put the best ideas on the table. Every time I felt, as an employee and as a leader, something did not go well, a decision that we were supposed to have collectively made, it's always because there was some fact that was hidden and that was not mentioned, which actually derailed it in the end. So it also disengages people. It very quickly puts off people and leads to skepticism. Skepticism in walking the talk.
Any particular things you do, Chitra, to increase transparency?
We are small enough, thankfully. I think that's a problem. I've seen it it's likely to occur with more frequently with scale. So in our case, given we are all the time together, in a sense, literally every day, rain or shine, whatever, snow or tropical hurricanes, we are on virtually so far. Since I have reflected on this transparency being an undercurrent to derailing, I try to give all the big picture, the broader context, why we are doing, why we should be doing. Are there other ways? Invite people to bring other, even if it's related to their own, promotions or pay increases. Show me, right? Bring the data. Let's look at the data together. And so I think when the organizations become bigger, then you see these silos, inadvertently, even for benign reasons, they may tend to happen, build up, and then the transparency becomes a victim of that growth sometimes.
I like the idea. It's not just data. It's not just information. It's also like, why are we doing this? What's the purpose? And what's the implication, right? So it's all that kind of data as well, not just the project data. Here's the client information and things like that. Like I said, thank you, Chitra. Priya, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to weigh in on this too, because it's such a very terrific topic in terms of what works and what doesn't work, right? And traditionally, all of these hiring, promotion, and all of these decisions have been extremely subjective decisions. And the minute there was subjectivity, there was innate biases that creeped into it. And then we said, let's make it objective. Let's make it data-driven. So, traditionally, we're used to getting affiliated to or wanting or inclining towards people that look like us and that talk like us and that are similar to us, where we have some shared interests, shared path, or shared education background or culture. So with that subjectivity into the mix, we then said, let's make it objective, let's make it data-driven. Now, the challenge with that is, even the data, again, to your point, Frank, we do not have very much of the minorities related data in many of the areas that we're working with. So there is lack of data pertinent to this, and that's one challenge. And even if you have the data, and then you say, these are the people we are promoting in an organization, there may be some subjective rating that was already given that prevented some people from even making it to that cutoff to that next level. So there is, it is, the one thing that I would say is try to make it anonymized. Like, for example, we cannot do this more in the promotion setting, but at least in a hiring setting, we can anonymize the data and make a decision on whether these are the people that we're going to pursue as the people that we have screened for going to the next rounds. I think those, and traditionally we're also seeing where the first conversation happens via a phone call rather than a Zoom meeting, right? So that is another thing that is also prevalent these days in terms of removing as many subjective biases from our decision points. And so being data-driven is absolutely fantastic, but then are we that, and data is only going to be just as good as what you're putting into it, and what are the benchmarks and cutoff that you are putting into it in terms of the process. So I would say what worked is data, and what didn't work is also data. And so we have to be absolutely be careful in how we are leveraging and making sure we're having an inclusive conversation and framework into our processes and organizations.
Thank you. Thank you. Data is what you swim in every day in your job. Thank you for the caution in terms of how data is already entailed, has already embedded in it subjective ratings or subjectivity. So you mentioned the idea.
Because data, it's a fantastic point Priya brought up. It's actually not, it's data is replete, and you can make any hypothesis to be valid if you choose the right kind of data to support your hypothesis. And that's a pitfall leaders cannot afford to fall into, right? You have to be very mindful of not be led merely by data. It has to be led beyond by your mission and charter and purpose and why we are together, and ultimately people. These are real people about whom we are making decisions, and that has to play a major role than some market data that can conveniently justify the decision I'm making.
Thank you, Chitra. I know today we don't have a session on AI, but could you touch on AI? Because that's where existing data feeds into algorithms, and the algorithm will direct our action. Any caution or any suggestions about using AI or not using AI in making decisions in a more inclusive way?
Sure. We already talked about, data is
Yeah.
is something that you have to be extremely be cautious about. Second, I actually use these three words. You have to be artful about using AI: accountability, responsibility, and transparency. So you cannot say, "Oh, I built an AI. It used this kind of data, so I'm not accountable. It's AI's decision." That is just not going to be so. Every organization, every department, every developer, every engineer who builds that, was responsible in building, has to be accountable. So accountability is very, very critical in terms of the data that is being used to train the AI algorithms, AI systems. And second is about responsibility. Responsibility is about ensuring that the decisions our systems are making are not just automation-led decisions. It is also, there is a human in the loop. Whenever you've seen successes, I've always observed successful AI solutions have always had some very critical element of human oversight, human in the loop, human in the design. So, and that never to be forgotten, that I worked in, if you've read my history, for 10 years, I was dedicated to saving US homeowners from foreclosure during the biggest housing crisis since 1930. So part of that was, there was always a human face for every machine learning model I built. How is it going to serve Mr. X living in East Texas so his family can continue to live in the home that he bought it with such love? That was that needed to be infused into the model we are building. The model may be built with numbers, but the decisions coming out of the model needed to be led with that responsibility, right? It's a social responsibility, human responsibility. Next is transparency. This is where I think everybody, the ChatGPT, everybody is going nuts about it. But as consumers, as users, as developers, as scientists, we need to demand transparency. What was the data that was used to train your algorithms, so that we become more informed, more well-informed consumers, leading to the better use of AI. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. We should do another session on AI on this topic. Great. Thank you, Chitra. By the way, we have a few more minutes left. Any questions from the audience? You can just unmute and ask.
Excuse me, may I have a question?
Please do.
All right. So to be honest, I have two questions. One, one from Chitra and one from Frank. So, Chitra, you talk about how in your companies, I don't know, that was Amicus Brain or the previous one, IBM. You tried as much as possible that everybody's voice can be heard. So, did you have any sort of measurement? I mean, to measure after all of these efforts, you find out that those minorities, they are satisfied that all of their voices are heard. And the question with Frank, I hope we have time. I don't know. So you talk about the praising and recognition at the beginning of each meeting. I'm curious about it. I mean, the details of it. Is it more on evaluation based, or it is coming from the encouraging perspective? Because that might be different. So, which perspective? What was your priority in that process? Thanks.
Maybe we can get to the praise first, Frank, and then we'll come back to the how people are satisfied with their voices being heard.
Yep, that's great. So I think it's Motaba. So the way that the praise actually works is in Microsoft we instituted it. It literally looks like a replica of Twitter, where you put in the name of the employee and it has, like a 4 or 5 different templates. Great job. Thank you for your teamwork, 3 or 4 prompts, and you're able to put in a sentence or 2. It's more from the encouragement than it is for the evaluations. Now, what I will tell you is that I encourage my team whenever they get praise, whether it's through the praise tool within Microsoft or maybe informally. Sometimes a customer might send an email, hey, thank you for yesterday or whatever. I encourage them to actually save. So take a snapshot or a screenshot of it and put it in a Word doc. And then in the connect part of the evaluation, right, that we talk about, we do twice a year, we actually have a place for attachments. And I encourage my employees to actually take those praises or any acclamations that they get in that Word doc and attach it to the connect. Because one of the things that I talked about earlier is that I want to, recency bias is a really big deal, right? A lot of times when we do evaluations, we're looking at individuals, the most recent thing that occurred is what's on top of mind. And that could be a positive thing, it could be a very negative thing. So what the praise tool does is it sort of formalizes the ability to eliminate that recency bias so that when we think about them as an employee, if they've done the work to actually cut and paste that, then we have like a history of the things that they've done over the course of the 6 months or however long it's been since their last connect. And we're not focused on the last month of work. So I hope that answered your question. It's definitely from an encouragement perspective at first. It's like a kudos to someone, right, for a good job they did most recently, but then they can take that and use it historically as part of their connect.
Thank
and
you,
Chitra,
Priya.
I'll let you answer the next question.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So, Mohi, larger companies, there are so many measurement instruments, right? Quarterly surveys and sometimes even weekly check-ins and yearly, employee pulse. We have gone, so those are all the metrics that were very, very carefully crafted to get at the true sentiment of the employee, their morale, their well-being, and so on. In our present company, one thing when I walked away from Avia, I didn't want to be overloaded with processes. That is just a little bit of, okay, how do we actually have a light touch? And I can afford to because we are small. So you have to come and ask me this question maybe 10 years later. So currently it's light touch. We are small enough to tune into who has bought in truly. If you know how in a group discussion, someone going totally, for the decision and someone is like, yeah, okay. So you get to pick on that, those nuances. And so you go back and follow up in a week's time, whether it's still bothering them or they have just fallen in line with it. So again, scale will change many of these things, correct? There will be proper instruments like Priya and Frank and Alysha talked about, very thoughtfully done to make sure the sentiments are well captured. So currently we can afford to be light touch, have a light.
Thank you, Chitra. Alysha, Priya, do you have a last thought you'd like to share with our audience?
No, I think everything's been captured really well today, so I'm good on my end.
Excellent.
Yeah, likewise, in the interest of time, absolutely. This has been a terrific opportunity, and thank you so much for this.
Thank you so much for generously sharing your time and wisdom with us. Let's give our panelists a round of applause, or however virtually you can do that. Thank you so much, appreciated. For those of you who are doing the certificate program, again, write up your reflection. We're eager to see what ideas stuck with you and how you can make use of the ideas. And thank you again to Alysha, Priya, Chitra, and Frank. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.